Moses was called out of Egypt not once but twice, first in body, fleeing for his life, and later spiritually, where he learned humility during 40 years in the wilderness. His path mirrors ours more closely than many care to admit. This is the story of one man's struggle to understand the God of his fathers, and how he ultimately learned to trust God rather than himself. He was born into a world of despair. Hebrew slaves groaned under the whips of their Egyptian taskmasters, and he had already survived Pharaoh's orders to kill the newborn males of Israel. His first attempt was to work them to death, forcing the slaves into ruthless labor. But the Israelites only multiplied. So Pharaoh turned to the Hebrew midwives, commanding them to kill every son born to the Hebrew women. But the midwives feared God and let the boys live. Finally, Pharaoh ordered that every newborn son be cast into the Nile. Economic oppression had failed. Secret infanticide had failed. So Pharaoh moved to open, state-sponsored genocide. It was into this chaos that Moses was born. Scripture tells us he was no ordinary child. His parents saw something extraordinary in him, and for 3 months his mother hid him from Pharaoh's decree. When she could no longer protect him, Jochebed placed him in a small, waterproof basket among the reeds along the Nile, in a spot where Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe. There the princess found him and drew him out of the water, naming him Moses, meaning drawn out. By adopting him as her own son, she placed him in a position to one day become a prince of Egypt. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's household, educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians, and mighty in words and deeds. But his birth mother had nursed him as a young child, and in those years she whispered to him the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of Joseph's dying promise that God would one day bring his people out of Egypt. Moses grew up knowing exactly who he was, and he believed he was the one chosen to deliver his people. When he was 40 years old, Moses saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he struck the Egyptian down, believing his people would understand that God would deliver them by his hand. But they did not understand. The very next day, when he tried to stop 2 Hebrews from fighting, one of them scoffed. "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moses' conclusion was correct. He was the one chosen to deliver Israel, but his timing was completely wrong. Rejected by his own people and hunted by Pharaoh as a murderer, Moses fled into the desert, a man without a country and without a future. 40 years passed in the wilderness. Moses married Zipporah, tended sheep for her father Jethro, and raised 2 sons. Once a mighty prince of Egypt, he had become a humble, anonymous shepherd, stripped of ambition and pride. Then one day, Moses saw a bush burning that was not consumed by the flames. As he approached, a voice called out, "Do not draw near. Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, afraid to look upon God. God told Moses that he had surely seen the affliction of his people in Egypt and had heard their cries, for he knew their sorrows intimately. Then came the charge, "Come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people out of Egypt." Moses, still haunted by his past failure, argued that he was not the man for the task. Who was he? They wouldn't believe him. He was slow of speech. Send someone else. When Moses asked God's name, the answer came, "I am who I am." God would be whatever his people needed him to be in every generation to keep his promises. Moses and Israel were now in contact with the God of their fathers, the one who has power over life and death, and who would do whatever it took to bring his people home.